Farmers' leader warns of escalation if government ignores tax protest. Jeremy Clarkson brands policy a hammer blow to the back of the head for agriculture. Prominent farmers have hinted at the possibility of more extreme actions if the government refuses to reconsider its plan to reduce inheritance tax relief on agricultural properties. The warning came as 13,000 protesters gathered in Westminster to oppose the proposal. Tom Bradshaw, president of the National Farmers Union, NFU, stated that the agricultural community is prepared for a tougher stance with ministers and more disruptive demonstrations. He predicted further localized protests if the government proceeds with the controversial budget measure. The ball is in the government's court. It's up to them to decide how they respond, Bradshaw remarked after meeting around 150 MPs in Whitehall. Farming leaders used the meeting to highlight how the policy could lead to food shortages and the disintegration of family farms. Despite the protests, ministers remain firm. Environment Secretary Steve Reed dismissed concerns, arguing that the impact of the measure has been overstated by many demonstrators. Television presenter and landowner Jeremy Clarkson addressed the protesters, describing the proposed policy as a hammer blow to the back of the head for the farming sector. First introduced in Chancellor Rachel Reeves's budget, the proposal to remove inheritance tax relief for farms valued over £1 million has sparked outrage in rural communities. Oliver Atkinson, a farmer from Hampshire who participated in the protest, urged the government to acknowledge this was rushed, poorly considered, and ultimately a mistake. Tom Morphew from Full Circle Farms in Sussex told The Independent that he joined the protest to advocate for future generations of farmers. If this policy continues, there won't be a next generation, he said. It's not just about the tax, it's about food, Morphew emphasized. We produce food here. If we're forced out, the UK will rely on imports from places like Peru, Spain, or Portugal. When those countries face crises, we'll be left without food, and prices will skyrocket. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, speaking at the G20 summit in Brazil, rejected claims that Labour's budget is waging a class war with its changes to inheritance tax and VAT on private schools. No, absolutely not. That's not what this is about, he insisted, noting that the vast majority will be unaffected. Although the protest remained mostly peaceful, footage emerged showing tractors damaging a no-entry sign in Westminster. The Metropolitan Police labelled the incident as unacceptable. In a joint statement, Steve Reed and Rachel Reeves defended the policy, saying that tough decisions were necessary to address gaps in public finances. We recognize the strong feelings expressed by farming and rural communities, the statement read. We are unwavering in our support for Britain's farming industry because food security is national security. That's why we are committing £5 billion to farming over the next 2 years, the largest investment in sustainable food production, rural economic growth, and nature recovery in our nation's history. Bradshaw, who met with Reed the night before the protest, hinted at internal disagreements within the government. He claimed that Reeves had refused to engage with farmers and suggested that the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA, had not been consulted on the budget. Asked whether there is a disconnect between DEFRA and the Treasury, Bradshaw responded, "The fact that we're even debating the figures shows how flimsy the policy's foundation is." DEFRA's data paints a vastly different picture from Treasury's historic figures. There are probably some intense discussions happening behind closed doors, he added. Treasury figures suggest that about 3/4 of farmers will not owe inheritance tax under the new policy. However, farmers dispute this, citing DEFRA data indicating that 66% of farm businesses exceed the £1 million threshold, meaning they would be subject to the tax.